I had a wisdom tooth pulled out, and it still wasn't the most uncomfortable experience I've had this week. Hello, welcome back to Graded, where I take a piece of media, analyze it, give my thoughts, and then slap a letter on it at the end to give it some value. Last week's episode left me curious to see how the big man Russell T would tie up the ongoing seasonal story and juggle with 3 villains he's given us. I was happy to mark last year's finale as a blip in Russell's otherwise strong rapport with Doctor Who, and gave him the benefit of the doubt that he'd be able to turn things around in his second season. This review is a little longer than my previous ones, so I have provided time-stamped chapters if there's a specific part you want to hear my thoughts on. I also apologise if I sound a bit sickly as I'm coming off having a bug and dental surgery, so please forgive me on that. So, how did the reality war follow up from Wishworld? Did it give us a satisfying conclusion to Season 2 of Disney Who? Or was it more of a reality skirmish? Let's find out. One of the things I was most looking forward to in this episode was the exploration of the Underverse and seeing where the Doctor would end up after last week's cliffhanger. Instead, the cliffhanger is resolved instantly when Anita, yes, Anita from the Christmas special, just shows up with a literal magic door to pull the Doctor away. Then for some reason the show gives us a full montage of the time the Doctor and Anita spent together, as if we need keys jingled in front of us to remember a character from only 8 episodes ago. And the key jingling doesn't stop there. We get these unnecessary scenes of Anita exploring the Doctor's past via hotel doors, so the show can go, "Aw, you remember Matt Smith? Remember John Pertwee? Oh, remember the Daleks?" Honestly, I find it tragic that this is the only on-screen Dalek appearance we've had since the new era started, just a glorified classic Who flashback. And then there's the Rani, who apparently knows nothing about the Time Hotel because she takes Christmas Day off. She's a Time Lord with no ties to Earth. This just doesn't make sense for her behaviour. The Mrs. Flood Rani just feels like a completely different character. Her motivations don't track, and not to forget her whole ability to break the fourth wall is for some reason no longer present and is not addressed at all. The Time Hotel now allows the Doctor, and basically any character who interacts with it, to desynchronize from the Wish World and regain their memories. It's a convenient but not entirely terrible solution. My issue is that we've basically solved everything set up last week in the first 5 minutes. The Doctor also randomly drops his jacket and suddenly changes outfits. I can't even explain this. We get a shot of him dropping his jacket on the floor, and in the very next scene, he's wearing his outfit from episode 1. How or why this happens is never explained, but honestly, this is the least of the episode's problems. Anita can just hold open a magic door at Unit HQ, and suddenly everyone starts regaining their memories. It basically reduces her role to that of a glorified doorstop. Rose also shows up here, the only notable character missing from last week. Well, I guess Morris Gibbons as well, but he's not even mentioned. I actually found Rose's reappearance consistent with Conrad's world, with his ideology. It makes sense that a trans person wouldn't exist in his version of a perfect reality. So having her suddenly appear once Conrad's influence fades was a powerful moment. It said a lot without needing to say anything. But then the Doctor immediately explained to us Conrad couldn't imagine Rose. It's such a missed opportunity. Let the audience put it together. Don't ruin a great visual moment with clunky exposition. Kate is then able to gather the other unit members, Ruby, Mel and Shirley, because they're all biochipped. This isn't even questioned by the Doctor. Did they all consent to being biochipped? When did this happen? It's just tossed in as a convenient plot device to get the few characters who weren't already at Unit HQ to Unit HQ, so that the plot can happen. Oh, and apparently Shirley has rocket boosters on her wheelchair now. Okay. It's also worth mentioning how overused this unit set has become in this era. Last year's season finale took place almost entirely at Unit. So did the Giggle if you want to count that as a finale. Ncuti might already have the least diverse set of locations of any Doctor. I get it, there's a budget now, and this unit set is probably very expensive, so they're trying to get their money's worth. But the result is that the budget feels like it's limiting the creativity of the show instead of expanding it. It's now time for us to sit through an exposition dump about the returning classic villains. instead of, actually seeing them do anything. I was genuinely looking forward to a reunion between Mel and Rani, since they faced off back in Classic Who. But instead, Mel just reads the first line of Rani's TARDIS wiki page, and that's it. There's a genuinely interesting bit of conflict set up between Belinda and Shirley over Poppy. Shirley wants to destroy the world because she's oppressed by it. Meanwhile, Belinda wants to keep the fantasy since her daughter is a part of it. That could have been a great scene and made a great emotional and weighty plot point. Instead, it's wasted on a couple of lines and is never mentioned again. Then, Rani finally shows up, just to deliver some mustache-twirly villain exposition. Narratively, I do like Rani's plan, wanting to use Omega to build a new Gallifrey, and rejecting Poppy because she's half human. There's real potential here, but again, it's just one big exposition dump. Then she walks off to release Omega anyway. And remember last episode when it was set up that she'd need to destroy reality to get Omega? Yeah, now they find him without needing to do that. There's also a random lore drop in here about Time Lords being sterile. It's not clear whether this is a reference to the Timeless Children, where the Master destroyed Gallifrey, or the Time War, but apparently now Time Lords can't reproduce, and we learn this in a couple of throwaway lines. I've not watched The Timeless Children since its release, so I don't remember the Master doing any kind of genetic bomb. Then the Doctor manages to get into the Bone Palace by hacking Rani's bone segue from the last episode. You remember, right? The scene where she uses it to go to Italy to buy ham to make a sandwich for Conrad. That whole bizarre scene from last week apparently existed just to establish that she owns this weird skeletal hover scooter, which she doesn't even use in the episode, by the way, because she just teleports straight into Unit HQ. So the bone segway's only function in the plot is to give the Doctor a way into the Bone Palace, and that's it. We get an action scene with the unit tower fighting the bone beasts. It's fine, and it's nowhere near as good as action scenes from previous finales. It probably looked good in the cinema, which I didn't go to. Also, Kate steering the entire tower with a literal steering wheel was absolutely bizarre. The final confrontations are split across two scenes, the Doctor confronting the two Ranis, and Ruby teleporting into Conrad's room. These play out in parallel, but for the sake of this review, I'm going to break them down separately, because both are botched in different ways. Let's start with the Rani and Omega.
Look at this dude. Wait till you see the... No, 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 no.
Omega is a villain from two classic serials, The Three Doctors and The Arc of Infinity, and he's always stood out to me as one of the more fascinating Time Lords. He's essentially the reason the Time Lords have access to time travel, a brilliant engineer lost in an alternate reality consumed by isolation and delusions of grandeur. But he's not a god. He's not a sinner. Russell seems to have skipped the TARDIS wiki on this one, because instead of exploring what made Omega unique, we get another CGI monster. At one point, Kate even says that her father called him the Mad God, which is just wrong.
No, not forgotten. All my life I've known of you and honored you as our greatest hero.
A hero? I should have been a god!
Omega believes he should be treated like a god. That's the point. He was abandoned by the Time Lords, left to rot in the antimatter universe. He wants recognition. He's quite tragic in a sense. But if you just make him a literal god, then you lose all the internal conflict. You erase what made him a compelling villain in the first place. Not only is Omega turned into a god, he also loses his intelligence. He just eats for Rani, then makes a throwaway comment about her tasting sweet. That's it. One of the most interesting Classic Who villains reduced to a CGI monster with a famous name slapped onto it to make us care. And the Rani? Completely wasted. In my last review, I said I really liked Archie Punjabi's performance. I was genuinely excited to see what they do with her from here, but all she does is deliver a bunch of exposition before getting eaten halfway through the episode. Sure, Mrs. Flood is still around, but she just teleports away. Okay. At least we've still got 30 minutes of the episode left for the Doctor to face off against Omega.
I'm a fire in my laser!
Oh, there are exactly 3 minutes and 30 seconds between Omega emerging from a tomb and getting defeated. He's on screen for maybe 2 minutes. I've literally spent longer talking about Omega in this video than the show spent using him. I have nothing else to add here. This is just awful writing. It's an awful return of a classic Who villain. So, let's talk about Conrad. So Ruby teleports into Conrad's little streaming room using Project Indigo. You remember Project Indigo, don't you? From the Stolen Earth? You liked the Stolen Earth, didn't you? Just clap, because thing you like came back. Conrad in this episode, and the last, is played much more sympathetically, despite being pretty clearly irredeemable in his first appearance. Lucky day. That episode actually damaged Conrad's character more than it helped him, because it didn't do the work to earn the kind of redemption arc that this episode is now attempting. There is potentially compelling character here, a villain driven by misguided but genuine ideals, but the episode splits his focus between him and the Rani Omega plot, and as a result, neither thread gets the development it deserves. The core idea this episode seems to want to explore is how strong, noble desires, like the need to protect others or ensure equality, can be twisted by toxic ideologies. Conrad wants everyone to be safe and fed, but he's deluded himself into thinking his neoconservative worldview is the only way to achieve that. That's an interesting concept. There's an element of sympathy in that foundation, but the execution just isn't there. A great example of this type of villain done right is N from Xenoblade Chronicles 3. In Xenoblade 3, the world is stuck in a kind of death loop. People are reborn over and over again, without remembering their past lives. N is a character who across countless cycles fails again and again and again to save a woman he loves. Eventually, the main villain reveals the truth to him. He's watched her die in his arms in life after life, and that pain will never stop. But he's offered a deal. If he joins the villain's cause, embraces a static and frozen world where nothing changes, he and the woman he loves will be granted immortality. And so N makes that choice, not out of evil, but because he believes it's the only way to protect her. His noble desire to save someone he loves is twisted into something monstrous. But because we understand his pain, we sympathize with him. And when he eventually breaks free and sacrifices himself to destroy the villain and end the cycle, it feels earned, it's powerful, because the narrative built the foundation for us to care. Xenoblade 3 is a far stronger critique of neoconservatism that Doctor Who has ever managed. N is a tragic villain who shows how real heartfelt desires can be exploited by toxic ideologies. Conrad, by comparison, is trying to fill that same narrative role, but he's given none of the development or emotional groundwork to justify the redemption the show hands him. The show wants us to see him as a tragic figure, but it hasn't earned that perspective. Ruby uses the Wish Baby, which is now just a full-blown MacGuffin, to wish Conrad a happy life. And that's it. He vanishes, and we're later told he becomes a chef. It's a bizarrely sentimental wrap-up for Conrad. His conclusion is almost as much of a throwaway as Omega's is. With Conrad's wish world erased, we then have to resolve the fate of Poppy. As reality resets, Poppy begins to disappear too, and the scene on the TARDIS with Belinda and the Doctor quietly folding up Poppy's coat as it shrinks smaller and smaller before vanishing is genuinely touching. What makes it work is that Ruby's the only one who notices. The Doctor and Belinda keep talking, unaware that the child they just lost is fading from memory. It's a quiet, understated bit of tragedy. And I feel so bad for Millie Gibson. She's done the absolute most with the material she's been given, and the moments like this show just how much weight she can bring to the scene. She seems to be so invested in Doctor Who behind the scenes, and I don't know what happened during production, as she was clearly meant to be the companion for this season. The idea that Ruby is now the only one who remembers Poppy is really sad, but I'm also confused. Why doesn't the Doctor remember her? he's usually immune to this kind of reality warping nonsense. Like in Cold Blood, when Rory gets erased by the time crack, Amy forgets him, but the Doctor doesn't. So either the Doctor can't remember Poppy now, or he does and is just being a massive arsehole to Ruby for no reason. Then we get 5 full minutes of Ruby desperately insisting, Poppy was real, while everyone at unit just shrugs and says, who's Poppy? Over and over. It's repetitive, frustrating, and doesn't add much, until the Doctor finally decides to do something about it and runs back to the TARDIS. So the Doctor decides the solution is to blast the TARDIS with regeneration energy to create a time schism and bring Poppy back. I have no idea how this is supposed to work, like logistically and metaphysically. Nothing about this tracks, but it doesn't really matter because these final scenes very clearly feel like reshoots, tacked on after Ncuti decided he was leaving the show. And then, out of nowhere, surprise! Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor shows up. It makes absolutely no sense, but honestly, I kind of liked it. I haven't rewatched any of the Chibnall era since it aired, but maybe I should, because after the RTD2 mess, it's possible my opinions have changed. Jodie was never a problem with that era, it was the writing for me, and here, even if she's only around for a glorified cameo and for some fan-baity nostalgic content, I think she does a great job. Still, this whole scene exists less for the story and more for content like YouTube thumbnails and Twitter clips, and it kind of works, but it's also empty calories. Fun in the moment, but meaningless the second it ends. So the Doctor's regeneration schism actually works, and we get this short epilogue where he visits Belinda, and Poppy is miraculously there. And then Belinda's entire backstory is just retconned before our eyes. Apparently she was always coming home for Poppy. So we've taken a career-driven, independent woman, someone who was openly critical of the Doctor, and rewritten her into a single mother with no memory of ever not being a mother. And when the Doctor scans her daughter's DNA right in front of her, she just goes along with it. Just blank approval. I honestly can't think of a worse companion conclusion than this one. It doesn't feel earned, it doesn't feel satisfying, it just feels like a lazy way to give the episode some artificial closure. What's worse is that it actively undermines the rest of the season. And Ruby? She doesn't even get a proper farewell scene. No final moment with the Doctor. She's just gone. Ncuti's regeneration scene is just meh. I didn't feel anything. And that's not because he's a bad Doctor. He's clearly not. It's because he was never really given a chance to be the Doctor. 2 8-episode seasons, barely any character development, and writing that seemed more interested in referencing itself than actually building something new. It's the modern equivalent of Colin Baker's 6th Doctor, full of potential, squandered by poor planning and tone-deaf showrunning. And then he regenerates into Billy Piper. Look, stunt casting the first modern companion as the next Doctor. It's not bold, it's not clever, it's just pathetic, the kind of move a show makes when it's out of ideas and desperate to go viral. This era of Doctor Who is creatively bankrupt. It doesn't need a soft reboot, it needs a hard reset. New writers, new showrunners, new vision, new everything. Russell T Davies, a man whose past work I genuinely respected, has completely lost the plot, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt for so long, but this broke me. That regeneration scene? A Twitter page discussing film posted it. 23 million views. It's likely the most viewed moment of Ncuti's entire era, a moment more people saw out of context, and that's exactly what this current executive mindset wants. They don't want meaningful storytelling, they want engagement. Rage clicks, quote tweets, TikToks, memes, controversy, content that spreads, not content that stays with you. This is how we end up with the Minecraft movie. What Russell and the executives around him don't seem to grasp is that if you don't satisfy your core audience, they're just going to leave. It's like the show wants to be enigmatic recollection, but it has no idea why that works. It doesn't understand how to build a genuine relationship between professionally generated content and user-generated content.
And Doctor Who wished it was like the old days.
Well, This is the part where I grade the episode, and if you've been paying attention at all, you already know where this is going. We take a genuinely interesting concept from the last episode and completely blow it in under 30 minutes, drown in exposition, and then spend the remaining time watching one companion get completely forgotten and another one get completely retconned. Then, for the grand finale, we play the last desperate card Russell has left in his deck. All for content. I give the reality war an F.